So recently, I've seen that there's been an increase in like retro areas, retro nooks, having a retro collection with maybe like a CRT TV, maybe one of those combo units with a built-in VCR or DVD player, or if you want to go really crazy, you have a separate one connected up to it, maybe alongside a game console as well, like a PlayStation, GameCube, original Xbox. And then we have this. Yeah, what did you expect? You really thought I would have anything less than this? And of course, we have Michael Bolton alongside some other CDs from the 80s and 90s, because what else do you expect from a CRT setup like this? With the wood grain and everything. So basically, I'm two steps ahead because while everyone else was upgrading to HD, and now they want to re experience analog, I never left. I've always had some kind of CRT setup in some way, shape, or form, and do I really have to say anything? Just look at the setup here. This is pretty much as 90s to early 2000s as you can possibly imagine. Now, we will talk about the individual components and further upgrades I would like to make with the setup here, because there is a lot we can improve with this. But even in its current state right now, come on, this is awesome. Now, if you think that this is my only TV setup, honestly, I wouldn't blame you, considering all the other content I've made in the past. I do use retro technology on a pretty regular basis, but believe it or not, I do have HD compatible television sets, I have HD compatible devices. I mean, we even have an Apple TV in this setup here, believe it or not. Plus, I guess you could also count all the iOS devices with Retina displays because they also have HD displays, right? So, I do use HD on a regular basis, but if I want to re-experience analog and go back to 1998 here, all I have to do is power this up, and, well, just choose whatever I want to use here. So yeah, I guess it's pretty cool. Oh, what, you didn't see that? Sony was literally built different back in the 90s. Honestly, this is actually already a more difficult video to make because I just want to sit down and use the setup here. You just have the music on, no advertisements, no nothing, it just works. This is going to outlast other services, and you know what, in some ways it already has, because there's been plenty of different streaming services which have been discontinued, or they've been bought out, they've been transformed into something else. Meanwhile, this was made back in the 90s, the CDs were made back when the albums were released, and what do you know, they still work. So to actually start off the video itself and look at said cool stuff, not just use it off camera, the first and of course the biggest centerpiece of the setup itself is the Sony Trinitron. Now this is a solid piece of 90s glass technology, and yeah, it's awesome. It's a Sony Trinitron. Now, I will say that you don't have to have a Sony, but I happen to have one. It's fantastic. But I do also have non-Sony displays. This one is specifically a 27-inch big screen TV, at least for the 1990s. And I guess you could even say the early 2000s. Of course, this is way before the LCD and HDMI revolution. You kind of have to keep that off to the side when discussing a setup like this, because for the time, this was a solid TV. Obviously, it's not the highest end model, but for this one specifically, even though it's not the fanciest one available, it still works after all this time. Nowadays, if you have an older smart TV, chances are the software itself might not even work on it anymore because it's considered outdated. Now, this setup is actually a 5.1 capable surround sound system, which is exactly why we have 5 speakers. But yeah, it's not exactly set up in a true surround sound fashion, because the rear channel isn't supposed to be on top of the main channel here. The center is actually in the center, and unfortunately I don't have a subwoofer because this requires an active receiver, not just a passive one. So until I get an active Sony receiver, it's going to stay as it is. But honestly, even with just these speakers, it's fantastic. I barely have to move the volume dial, and it can easily go from 0 to 11 in like one short movement. Like, it's crazy. I don't know how. I've never put it beyond like 2 because I don't even know what the rest could do considering how loud this can get. And of course, you just gotta have that early 90s smooth jazz because it's a CRT wood grain setup. What else do you expect? Believe it or not, this Sony as well as that one isn't even connected up to the setup. How could I? I know, but I did say that the setup itself is kind of a work in progress in terms of there's more that I want to improve with it. Obviously, cable management is, well, non-existent. I mean, the front here looks fantastic, but if you look behind it, yeah, it's an entirely different story. Now, I set it up the way it is because I just wanted to have kind of a proof of concept to see how well it would work, and, well, I gotta say, it works really well, but it isn't perfect, and there's definitely way more components I can add to this, so we can further increase the hi-fi tower. So here we just have a standard run-of-the-mill ordinary VCR. Nothing special about this at all. See, completely ordinary. If it wasn't obvious, we do also have a web TV box. That's what this Sony is here. Unfortunately, I don't have it set up. It's not really usable at the moment because, well, it's web TV from the 90s and I need to set it up with a separate server and dial-up connection. But I mean, just look at it on the TV. It's like it was meant to be. Dude, it's web TV. Welcome to the future of the internet. It's the internet in your living room. Ironically, this made your normal TV into a smart TV, and it was actually more useful than a modern smart TV. It's actually crazy to think that this was 90s technology. Now, if it wasn't awesome enough, I also have the original box for this TV. So over here at the setups, there's the box. Okay, so apart from the TV, we also have to have audio, right? So like I said, it is a true 5.1 capable surround sound system, but I don't have it as a 5.1 right now. Although it would be really awesome, I still need that subwoofer. Now these speakers are actually from around, last I remember when I looked these up, it was like 2002, maybe 2000. So it is a little bit newer in terms of, you know, it's not directly from the 90s, but it's close enough. It does match the appearance of the hi-fi gear. The drivers are pretty insane. Yeah, it's really cool to have these speakers here. I've been using them with other setups in the past, but these are the new permanent home for them because, I mean, yeah, where else are you going to find a solid setup for this and not make use of these speakers? Now, if I didn't have these speakers, I could definitely make use of these as the left and right channel audio setup. They are still dedicated speakers. Like, this is probably something that you would see in another hi-fi system where all of these are identical because, well, I have 3 of them. So the left, the right, and of course the center channel here. So you don't have to necessarily use these as rear channel audio. It's just the way I'm using it right now because the system is capable of outputting 5.1 and, well, I have these. Now, if I didn't have these, I would still use these with this setup here. They're still solid speakers. And what's also really nice is that these also have a wood grain finish. Now, even though it doesn't match this wood grain or that wood grain, it still goes well with the speaker setup and the audio equipment itself. Now, these speakers don't have wood grain, but honestly, not a problem at all considering how awesome they sound. The other awesome part about these speakers is that, just like these, they're also matching pairs. Oh, don't worry, we will take a look at all of this awesome stuff here, but first, we gotta take a look at what makes this entire setup possible. The peak of audio and video hi-fi. This is Power Cinema VCR. So basically, ever since I saw that this existed, I knew I had to have it. Like, it's Power Cinema VCR. Do I really have to explain this? It's not just a standard VCR. It's a VCR and an amplifier. Best of all, it has that classic late 90s design language which Sony used with their hi-fi equipment, so it matches my mini disc deck and even the DVD player on top. Power Cinema VCR. It doesn't get better than this. Now, I will say that it's not exactly like the highest end VCR. It is a pretty solid model, but it's not like an SVHS deck or anything fancy like that. It is still composite only, but as you can imagine, the audio is... You're not going to find a better VCR with audio, at least unless it's like a really super high-end one, because the audio goes directly into a built-in amplifier. Now, I guess you could find a better one or use a good VCR with a dedicated amplifier, but for an all-in-one unit, this is the home theater in a box before it existed, really. Like, it's a VCR with an amplifier. Just unbelievable. Now, one unfortunate thing about this specific unit is that the VFD itself, while it does still work, it's not exactly in the best of health. Now, it does look even worse than the true brightness potential though, because I have this set to an even lower brightness level within the settings. And to be fair, it is a larger VFD display, but the important thing is that it does still work. The VFD display on the CD player, which is older than this VCR, still has a way brighter VFD display. So I guess it just depends on the specific design of the VFD and also how long it's actually been powered up for, because the longer it's been powered up or it has some kind of power applied, the shorter the life is going to be, because just like with the CRT or even a standard incandescent light bulb, it does have a limited lifespan. Oh, I guess I forgot, because this is actually the brightest it'll go. If we activate the dimmer setting, then it's basically invisible. Probably useful for a really dark viewing environment, but otherwise with a bright light like this, yeah, it's almost impossible to see. Also, as for the beeps that you heard at the beginning, that's actually an indicator telling you that the date and time has to be set. It even says it on the TV display if you have the TV powered up, so it only does it obviously when there's been power loss. It's not part of the normal startup procedure, but it also does sound very similar to the PS3 startup beep. So if it wasn't already made obvious, up here it says Integrated Amplifier / Video Cassette Recorder SLV AV100 with a VHS logo. Yeah, it's not just a VHS deck, it's a true proper VCR with definitely the best sound output, at least for any of the VCRs that I have. What's also really cool about this unit is that we still have this, the original factory sticker showing the different features that this unit has. Now usually you would see this within a store display because, you know, it's an advertisement sticker. It tells you what it's capable of actually doing, and of course the units themselves shipped out with the sticker as well, but most of the time they were usually removed and never to be seen again. This, however, is still here. Now it's obviously quite a big contrast between the black glossy plastics and just this yellow sticker here, but I think this actually enhances the experience because you just don't see stuff like this anymore. I mean, you don't see stuff like this every day, so having this alongside it also makes it really cool. So you have features such as sound fields. Now that's part of the stereo surround sound options, and It's actually pretty cool. We also have Auto TV, which is basically useless nowadays unless you have a fully featured analog TV setup. But back in the day, it would have been really awesome to have for different analog channels, channel presets, and just normal TV viewing experiences because it is still a VCR. It does have an analog TV tuner. We also have DSS and cable box control. Now, DSS itself is actually a Sony satellite service, which is really cool. You know, that was a thing in the 90s. I believe it was also compatible with the web TV systems, but you know, it's ancient technology now. I highly doubt that there's anything remotely still functional with that setup, but it would be really cool to have a Sony branded satellite just because it's the future, right? We also have a multi-brand glow-in-the-dark remote. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the official remote for this specific model, but I do have another VCR remote which still has jog shuttle controls, so it's close enough, but the original remote for this is really cool. Someday it would be nice to have one of those as well, but I'm just glad I actually have some Sony remotes in the first place. And of course, last but definitely not least, we have front AV inputs with easy setup. It's all made possible with this. That's how you know you have a high-end device, when you have a door hiding all of this extra functionality. TV, VCR, tape speed, channel presets, FM, AM. Yeah, this also has a radio tuner, a shift button, tuning mode, FM mode, a status button, video 2 input. Yeah, this has multiple video inputs. It's not just a receiver, it's not just a VCR, but it's also an entire audio-video receiver in terms of multiple composite inputs. Easy setup, timer record, quick timer, counter reset, memory. We also have an edit switch, and you even have a VTR command mode. So this basically means that if you have a lot of different Sony devices and you don't want the same remote to work on all of the devices simultaneously, you can switch which different channel it uses, which is just insane. So if you have high-end Sony equipment, you can set one remote to be on channel 1, one to be on channel 2, another on channel 3, or you could just have this off completely. And of course you have VCR Plus. Now this also doesn't really exist anymore because it was like a channel service where you could basically input a code and it would tell you that this program would be aired on whatever date, and you could set it to automatically record. And not only that, we also have audio digital signal processing and adaptive picture control too. Now this right here is obviously not a Sony, it's an Optimus, which was a Radio Shack in-house brand. Now this is actually the oldest component in the setup as well, so it doesn't exactly match the rest of the Sony equipment. But if I didn't save this player, simply put, it wouldn't exist anymore. Like, this was either going to be saved or it was going to be thrown out. So we have it here. It works fantastic. And when I initially got this unit, it did power up, but it wasn't working at all. And once I opened it up, I saw why. It had some bad belts, but once I replaced them, it's solid. It's a really simple construction. It does have metal inside, so it's not just a cheap plastic 5-disc changer. Plus, you can even open it up while it's playing a CD. So even though it's not as advanced as some of the later models, or even like a 5-disc DVD player, honestly, I've been really impressed with its performance. It has excellent sound quality. Of course, it's going to sound fantastic because we're using it with the Sony itself, but it's been solid. It doesn't skip discs. It just works. And of course, on top of the CD player, we have the Sony DVD player. Like I said, it's not hooked up at the moment, but this is a really solid player. I even have the factory remote for it right here. And even though, you know, it's not usable, because I still have it here because it matches the rest of the Sony equipment. It is a bit newer because it is from the year 2000, but it doesn't have HDMI. In fact, it advertises that it has component video output, so that's how you know it's advanced, at least for a device like this. Obviously, you know, there's other standards, other things we can go into, but for a CD, DVD player, and even video CD player, you can't go wrong with the Sony like this. And the last thing that we have here is this Zenith box. Now, this is actually a digital to analog TV converter. Honestly, I don't really use it, but I have it. And where else are you going to use a box like this? It's designed for CRT TVs or even like the early LCD TVs, which only for some reason had analog built in. It would be really awesome to have a completely analog system for setups like this, but this is kind of like a band-aid fix until I actually make something like that, because I mean, you kind of need to have an entire analog system set up just for that. So better than nothing, but there's still a lot we can improve in terms of cable television. Now, I do want to say that this setup didn't just appear overnight. I've been building it slowly, adding it component by component. I actually had the DVD player first, and then I got the CD player, and then finally I got the Sony itself, the Power Cinema VCR. So it's not something that just magically appeared, as awesome as it would be. If that was the case, it would also be a matching Sony CD player. It's the product of wanting to basically have the peak 90s hi-fi audio video setup and basically have a great area to enjoy standard definition content as well as play some games on a real CRT TV. By the way, if you're concerned about the heat that the system produces, because it is of course an amplifier, it's honestly not that bad of a setup. Now, even though we have components on top of it, there isn't any ventilation, at least on the top part here. So it's just a solid piece of metal, but we do have ventilation on both the left and the right side. We do have space to make sure it's not obstructed or anything. And more importantly, on the right side where the amplifier section is, we have a built-in from the factory cooling fan. So it does have active cooling. And also, as for the CD player itself, even though it is a very similar size to the amplifier, a lot of the space is actually air and the physical mechanism, so it's not like it's overheating. But I do keep this in mind, especially if I'm going to add even more components to the setup. With the power of wireless technology, we can even make the 90s setup a bit more futuristic, because we're using AirPlay on an iPad 2 to watch YouTube. So the only real more modern component is still considered obsolete because it's an Apple TV 3rd gen. Now this is, I believe, the 2013 revision, and honestly, I kind of didn't realize how good AirPlay is on these older devices. Now, I've used AirPlay before on old Apple TVs, but oftentimes I would have had like a lot of connectivity issues. Sometimes it just slows down or it crashes, but yet here it plays back just fine. In fact, I can even screen mirror the iPad. Now, I will say that in the past I haven't really reset the Apple TVs at all, but I've been looking more into how to make more use of them. This isn't my only Apple TV in this form factor. I have a 2nd gen, I have other 3rd gens, and once I reset them, I refreshed Apple TV OS or whatever, before it was called TV OS, it was its own separate thing. Once I reset the operating system on this, because you can do that with a micro USB cable and you connect it up to iTunes, it's as if it's a new AirPlay compatible device again. Like, it's not slow at all. So even though it may not be ideal because it doesn't really have support for modern apps anymore, like these used to support YouTube and other streaming services, but now they don't, they're still really solid AirPlay devices. And when you have a setup like this, it's more than perfectly capable because it's a 90s setup. Also, for the Apple TV, because it is an AirPlay compatible device, I can also stream music from my iTunes library up to this system. If I have movies or TV shows within the iTunes library, I can also stream that to this setup. Now, you probably saw these earlier, but yes, we do have some genuine game consoles here, such as an N64. Yeah, I've had an N64 this entire time, and you're just now seeing this. The funny part about this is that even though I've had this system for quite a while, I have a whopping 2 games for it. I don't even have an official first-party controller. I have a third-party one which is just in okay condition, I guess. It does work, but it's not the greatest. But I do also have a third-party memory card, so I guess that counts for something. But the reason why I put the N64 here is because, well, it looks really cool alongside the Trinitron. It matches the gray plastics. If I didn't have it here, It would otherwise just be off to the side, probably collecting dust. The only real problem that I have here is that I just need to get some more games for the system, and ideally get some better controllers. Now, as for the PS2, it might be a bit too new for the setup here because the PS2 Slim wasn't introduced until 2004, and the rest of the setup here is like the late 90s to the year 2000 basically. But we also have an Apple TV, so I don't really care. Also, I do have an original PS2, like the Fat Edition, but for the sake of keeping the space somewhat usable, I can easily have the Apple TV, the N64, and the PlayStation 2 on this one shelf. Now, if I had the original PS2 here, it would take up like half the shelf space, and I'd be left with either the N64 or the Apple TV, or maybe I would have to rearrange it, move it somewhere else. Right now, the way it is, it's been working out great. And the PS2 is also partially why I haven't set up the DVD player, because the PS2 also plays DVDs. But to be fair, I've mainly just been using the VCR compared to DVD playback functionality in the setup. Now, the PS1 would also be a fantastic option for the setup here because it would go really well with the wood grain and everything. I do have a PS1, that's not the issue. In fact, the PS1 is my channel profile icon, but for the sake of simplicity, I've just left the PS2 here because apart from the PS3, it only does everything. And if you thought that these were the only consoles in the setup here, well, you're wrong, because we have even more that you just can't see. So you have to remove the speaker here so we can get access to the cabinet. Open this up, and we have a GameCube. Now for this part of the setup, it probably looks better if you just leave it like that. It does have a nice clean finish, but when you open it up, there's nothing inside. It's just the GameCube. Now, there's nothing wrong with just having the GameCube here. I'm sure I could make use of the space for like actual video games, but I have those stored on another shelf. So it's not like I really need to make use of the space to its maximum potential, but it would be nice. And it's also not because I don't have extra consoles. I do have even more consoles that I can use with the setup, but then we go to another limitation, which is the Sony itself doesn't have that many available video inputs. The TV only has one composite input. The advantage of the Power Cinema VCR is that it has multiple video inputs because, as it's an amplifier, it can accept multiple video sources, but as you see here, we have 4 different devices, and apart from the video 2 input on the front, I'm basically making the most of the system already, so unless I get like a video switch box or, I don't know, something else, or maybe just figure out how to rewire the setup. That's one of the big downsides of this specific television, is that there's only one input. Now, there is also the RF input, which I'm not making use of right now, but it's also RF. So I do have a PlayStation to RF cable, which I could use. RF connections are actually not that bad whenever it's a smaller TV, but on a larger TV set like this, things do get noticeably more blurry than how they are with composite. So for the GameCube, you can remove it from the bottom part of the entertainment system here, but it's honestly not that bad with the way it is right now. The advantage is that it also has airflow, and even though the doors, whenever it's open, doesn't exactly look the best, it's only like this if you're actively using the GameCube, or alternatively, you remove the GameCube even though there's not a lot of slack on the cable right now. I don't remember how I set this up, it was a while ago. Ideally, it would probably make more sense to have a Wavebird controller, but I don't have a Wavebird. Fortunately, I do have official controllers for the GameCube and the PS2. And last, but definitely not least, is this. Now, this is a 2-drawer system which holds up the entire audio video center, and I also have some of this like shelving desk material. I've used this over with my Mac Pro area, but the reason why I've installed it here is because the components are ever so slightly like wider compared to this. So this basically just makes it a nice flat even surface, so that way we don't have any stability issues. Of course, with a setup like this, would you choose anything other than wood grain? Now, even though it may not be the perfect match as compared to, or like these aren't exactly the same in terms of the style of wood grain and the color, it's pretty close, and this is basically perfection for a setup like this. The other awesome part about this is that alongside supporting the audio video gear, is that it's also multi-purpose because it has these awesome drawers. In fact, I'm not even making the most out of this one because it's empty. But as you can see, this is not one of those drawers where it only takes up like half of the free available space. This is as long as the shelf itself. So there's a lot of potential with this, a lot of space for cables, accessories, really anything that we could need here. I am making use of the top one here. We have an Apple AirPort, which I was briefly testing out with the audio setup. So for AirPlay, that was before I added the Apple TV, because obviously with the Apple TV, it's only HDMI, so you need a converter for that. But we also have the antenna for the Sony. We have the box for an iPod to composite cable alongside the cable itself, which is underneath this controller. This is the third-party controller that I was talking about for the N64. But we do also have official GameCube controllers, which are fantastic. And we also have some official PS2 controllers. So this is just a great spot to store everything when they're not in use, because, you know, they're not wireless. It's not like we're in the PS3, Xbox 360 era. This is still all wired. But whenever you have a storage solution like this, it's honestly no problem at all, because you can just close it up and it's as if they don't exist, because wood grain. Now, if you've seen previous videos on the channel, this is probably a bit unexpected because we're going from Mac and PCs to the ultimate 90s hi-fi video setup here. Now, I always wanted to introduce this with it being as perfect as it could possibly be, but you know, that's never going to happen, realistically. Like, we can always make it better. We can always improve on it. There's a lot more that we can talk about this. We can go over the actual video games that I have for these systems. We can talk about movies on VHS, because I have a lot of different VHS tapes here. Even just down to, like, the Apple TV and AirPlay, because YouTube on a CRT. Now, even though it may not be the most optimal experience, it's better than nothing, right? We're going from HDMI to composite, and honestly, the picture is fantastic. Now, it's not going to be a high definition whatever display, but for a CRT display of its age and its size, like, that's perfectly readable. That's solid. So hopefully you enjoyed my overview of my 90s retro TV setup. Now, I guess you could say that it's kind of like a 90s retro nook, but I mean, let's be real here. This is more of like a dedicated full-blown living room setup compared to just a small retro gaming nook. And if you want to see even more of my console collection side of things, which is something that I have briefly talked about on the channel, like most of the time it's usually like the Macs and the PCs. So if you want to see more about this side of technology, then leave a comment down below. And of course, no VCR collection is complete without Shrek, because, I mean, you gotta have this, right? Oh yeah, also Shrek 2. We do, of course, also have on-screen displays for the different inputs. See, I also have a smart TV because it has an Apple TV connected up to it. Right? That makes it smart. And with that, if you enjoyed today's video, then consider leaving it a thumbs up. And if you want to see even more awesome content about everything here, then consider subscribing. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about the setup itself, and I can't wait to make it that much better. But that's it for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.